Today, I'm proud to introduce our next generation bass sampler, Behemoth Bass. Behemoth was sampled with a Canadian custom shop Dingwall. So not just a factory line bass, but a premium, highest grade instrument. Our goal was to get that huge sounding Dingwall tone heard on some of the biggest records of today, without necessarily having that over-the-top clang. You want some of that, just enough to cut. We really wanted to ensure that this bass can be used in as many contexts as possible. So let's quickly check out Behemoth Bass picking with the pick. What if we want to change to finger picking? We don't even need to use a key switch, we just click one button right here, picking style on finger, and we can check out the finger picking instead. Instantly a very different vibe and type of sound. These notes are tremolo picking, or tremolo-ish picking, let's say. They're at velocity 64, so around the middle of the range. I notice that when I am picking fast on a bass, I'm not digging into the string quite as much. You really just can't pick at full power while going like this, as opposed to when you're just doing like a big long note. But what if you wanted to hear what it sounded like? We added this new feature where you can just ignore all the velocities and put the bass on one specific picking intensity and just check what it sounds like. It's also really cool when you get a MIDI file from someone, or maybe they're just all 127, you can just click one button and quickly check what it would sound like picked a little softer. If I were to loop this and solo the bass, let's play this at soft. And then hard. Way more punch in there, way more digging into the string, and depending on the context of the song, you may want one or the other. Let me quickly loop just this picking and put it on the very, very lowest velocity so you can hear how gentle Behemoth can really pick if you want it to. So let's check it out on DI and on the softest velocity possible. And what about if we turn it up a little bit more? A little bit more. A little bit more. And then the max. Now, often this is going to be too much when picking fast, of course, but sometimes in something like a breakdown, you just really want your bass to go crazy on those hardest hits. So that's when you might go for a 127 and really go like bum, 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 bum. But when picking fast, you know, you want to dial it down a little bit. Now you may be wondering, okay, you program tremolo picking like this, can I tremolo pick any other way? And the answer is yes. We can take the exact same note and then use a tremolo picking key switch found on A# -2. Check this out. This is pre-recorded tremolo picking, and so if we speed up the DAW real quick, let's say like 150 here, then the picking will speed up with it. And then we can also pick gentler. Let's go to 61 here. So we do also have pre-recorded tremolo picking if that's your preference. But with how great this sounded to me already, I kind of didn't need it for this specific song. Next, the humanize button is actually really interesting. As you turn it up, it starts making decisions for you. If you go above 50%, it will generally only play the hardest articulation on the first beat. As you pick faster and faster, it will play less hard, as a human being would as well. And so essentially, when I am getting a MIDI from someone, I will really try to use the humanize and the overwrite MIDI before manually changing every single note. You will notice that usually some combination of like humanize case of ignore velocities medium, or no ignore velocities and humanize on 51 might already get you like 90% of the way there, and then you can focus on writing awesome music instead of fiddling with velocities. Of course, if you want to have the most realistic performance possible, you will want to tweak velocities yourself. This instrument does have a lot of depth, and so you can go really far if you want to. But whenever the bass just needs to be like part of the mix and you don't really want to spend too much time on it just yet, just click ignore velocities medium. It'll probably sound incredible already. Now let's check out the tone page. We have 4 EQ knobs. In case you want to dial in a tone without any extra plugins, sometimes all you need is a little more or a little less high-end to fit your mix. Next we have the string selection. Just like with Odin 3, you can essentially define where you want specific riffs to be played on your neck. So if you want to go higher up on the neck for a warmer tone, you can do that. If you want to go lower on the neck for a very bright tone, that is also an option. So I have this little loop here, and I'm simply going to shift between the different playing positions here on the tone page, and you will see how it's shifting dramatically. So we'll start on position 4, which means very high up on the neck, and I will go down the list. You will hear how it shifts. Personally, I prefer to stick around position 3. I think it's a nice balance between warmth and brightness. But of course, every playing position can have its place. It just depends on the context of the song. Then we have the human noises menu. These will trigger various error noises throughout your performance. Personally, I like to keep mutes on at all times because it's very hard to mute a string on a bass and not have some type of sound happen. Finally, just like with Odin 3, you can also soften the attack, though I don't find myself touching this very often on bass. The advanced section will look familiar to many Odin 3 users. The enforce menu will be familiar to those of you who have used our other virtual basses before. So when you turn this on, you are removing some of the sub frequencies of the original bass and replacing it with a sub sine wave, so you have extremely consistent sub low end. You can also choose how loud you want this wave to be to really dial in the subs of your mix. And then you also have 3 different options of waveform types. The icons might make you think that these are like saws and squares, but they're not perfect saws and squares because that would sound pretty weird in a bass. But it's more square-ish and saw-ish than the sine wave itself. So you really have the option to completely dial in your low end and have extreme control over it. A lot of top-level audio engineers use this trick, but doing it manually is a giant hassle. If you've recorded real bass, this means you still need to create a whole bass performance in MIDI for the sine wave to follow it, and then afterwards you need to automate that high pass to follow all those fundamentals. So with real bass, this is just an incredibly annoying process. But if you're in the MIDI realm already and you're using our products, this is just one button and you've got it. So I will loop this riff and I will turn the function on and off, and you will notice a difference in the waveforms down here. You will see it move up. I'm gonna turn it on now. Off again. On again. Off again. On again. You can just see the second it's turned on, the sub sine wave pushes up this entire low end. And for the final tab, routing, this is something I'm extremely excited for, and I don't think any other virtual bass on the market has this right now, so let me explain. You can route out this bass into lows and highs or lows, mids and highs. If you want to create your very own bass tone, what you often have to do is write everything in MIDI with the DI, then bounce that to a waveform file, so actual sound, then copy paste that wave file a few times, and process them like that. But what if you want to go back and tweak? That means that you now have to delete those wave files, go back into the MIDI, bounce it back out to wave, and basically put in extra time every time you want to slightly change your song. That ends today. Just like with drums, you can route out 3 channels of this bass, process them differently, so limit the low end, distort the high end, truly mix it like you would a real bass. And if you still want to make a change to the MIDI, you can, because you never bounce to audio. You are still working in the MIDI realm. So let me show you how that would work. In Logic, you would just click on this plus, and now you have 3 channels. Our lows go to 300, our mids go from 300 to 1500, and then our highs are from 1500 and up. You can absolutely change these numbers. This is just a default, but as you can see, you can set them like this. Make sure your overlaps are somewhat clean. Maybe you want to go to like 200, maybe this to 200-ish as well. So this track right here is our lows. I can just solo the lows. This is the mids. This is the highs. If you feel like the highs are a little too high up, maybe we go like 2000, more or less. And you can process everything however you want. Maybe you add some saturation to the mids, some extreme limiting on the lows. You can fully process while the plugin is still active, just like you would with drums. This is a complete game changer for artists and producers who love to write as they tweak and tweak as they write. One of my favorite new little features is the fact that we now have a bunch of little noises that a human would normally make as they play in the highest MIDI note range. So where normally there wouldn't be any sound whatsoever, I figured why not give you the ability to sprinkle human noise up there so you don't have to use a key switch to trigger any of them. So let me quickly show you some of those. These are the noises that happen when a player is playing and their left hand moves across the neck, or their hand bumps into the bass. They move their left hand a little quick and it bumps into the neck. All of these imperfections create a human performance. When a bass is in a full metal mix, this might not be super noticeable, but whenever the bass is playing solo or there's like a clean section, this really comes into its own. So right here, I have a clean little passage, just a pretty passage, and you will see at the top there's these little notes sprinkled throughout. So it's just cool to add that. It's like that 5% little extra human element. You can still, of course, trigger these with key switches as well, if that's your preferred workflow, but I've really found myself gravitating towards this workflow. Finally, some little miscellaneous information. Because Behemoth Bass didn't go too crazy on all the key switches, we were actually able to put the octaves in the same octave range as Guitar Pro. So if you're used to our previous basses, you'll have to shift your MIDI a little bit, but if you're not yet used to our basses, these octaves should match something like a Guitar Pro MIDI. Finally, we also have automatic delay compensation built into Behemoth, so you'll notice that maybe the pick attack will be slightly before the beat while the transient will be on the beat. So for most projects, you probably don't need to do any DAW compensation manually or anything like that. This is also a feature we want to implement into Odin. So that's Behemoth Bass. I'm extremely proud of the work we've done here, and I can't wait for you to experience it in your own session. You can go purchase Behemoth right now at solemntones.com, and happy producing.